Israel and Iran, and to some extent Turkey, are the really big boys in the Middle East. I mean, the Arab world has become diminished and diminished over time, for varieties of reasons, including our invasion of Iraq, which knocked out Iraq, which is a very major Arab country, out completely. The Arab Spring knocked out Syria and Egypt completely. Saudi Arabia and UAE are not real strong military powers. They're checkbook, if you would, powers, and they 100% rely on the United States essentially for their protection. So in a way, without the United States, they're not a match for Iran. So the Iranian threat has brought Israel and the Persian Gulf monarchies close to one another. This is a strategic alliance that benefits both of them. But it does not necessarily change the street view of the Palestinian issue or the place of Jews in the Arab world. I mean, these are not the same thing. In other words, because the princes in the Middle East have very logically decided that your enemy's enemy is your friend, and similarly, Prime Minister Netanyahu made that calculation, that automatically means that the Palestinian issue is completely dead. And actually, that's exactly what Iran is banking on, that the support for the Abraham Accords at the street level without a Palestinian deal is soft. And as we saw when the Gaza event happened and when the settlements issue happened, very quickly you could see that the mood in the Arab world was not supportive of Israel. Now, I would say Israel, and I would make a difference with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Prime Minister Netanyahu, in my opinion, needed Iran to be a bad regional boy. The reason is it allowed him to pose as the Churchill of Israel, as the one man who can defend Israel's security. It allowed him to deal with corruption issues. It was Iran that allowed him to be prime minister for as long as he was, in my opinion. It also allowed him to follow a policy of having both land and peace with the Arabs. If there was no Iran, if Iran was not playing the kind of negative role for the Arabs, there would not have been the Abraham Accords, and it would not have been as easy for Israel to continue the settlements and yet have a positive relationship with the Arabs. So Iran, in a way, has made it simple for Netanyahu to follow that policy. And then personally, Netanyahu drove Israel to oppose the Iran nuclear deal. He came to Congress, he undermined President Obama with the US Congress, etc. Now that he's gone, senior Israeli security officials are saying this was a mistake, that Iran is far more dangerous now than it was under the nuclear deal. Coming out of the nuclear deal did not lessen Iran's support for Hezbollah, for Hamas, Syria, all the things that threaten Israel. And at the same time, when there was the nuclear deal, Iran was much farther away from the bomb. The nuclear deal kicked Iran back to at least a year or more than a year from having enough enriched uranium to build one bomb. Now Iran is only 2 weeks away from having enough enriched uranium to build a bomb. Doesn't mean they're going to build a bomb, but in no way the nuclear deal did not solve the Iran problem, but it was better than not having it. So I think that's where it is. Israel is putting a lot of pressure on the US right now, but at the same time, I think because Netanyahu played the role that he did, Israel does not have the same kind of influence in Washington to prevent a deal that it had before. I think Israel and Iranian-Israeli rivalry is going to be very central to the future of the Middle East. But again, I think if Iran is under a nuclear deal, its danger to Israel won't go away, but it would be less of a danger than if it goes completely rogue.